and welcome to the Sim Racing Perspectives podcast for the 19th of August 2018. I'm your host, Davy Jones, and I'm joined by Mike from Sim Racing 604.
Hello, everyone.
And a very special guest, Mr. John Sabol. Hello, John.
Hello, guys.
John, thank you very much for joining. Unfortunately, Alex from the Extra Mile cannot join today. He's gone vacation, it seems. Lucky devil. So we hope to get Alex back again soon. To begin, I wanted to preface this episode with the fact that avid listeners may be aware that John only just appeared on Billy Strange's podcast. And we were aware that John was to appear on Billy's show and vice versa. I listened to Billy and John's discussion and took some notes, so I plan to have a sort of chat today and taking into context what's already being discussed. Nothing too major, even if only to aid you, John, in perhaps getting back into things, since those of us who try and create content know how time-consuming it can be. And as an additional note, I recall the ISR days when I'd be looking forward to podcasts and reviews from you, John, Billy and Darren. And then over time, everyone went their separate ways. And today I get to chat with you, John, and we've had Billy on, of course. So it just goes to show how times change. And that's how life is, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's just that is how things go from time to time. But yeah. No, thank you for having me on, and no, it's been nice to kind of get back in the community and see how things have changed and things have popped up like this podcast.
Exactly. Now, John, just some notes from your discussion with Billy from during the week. You're from Dayton, Ohio. And you're an aerospace engineer, and you have a degree in composite materials engineering, which I didn't know. And you've been working in the aircraft industry on aircraft fuselages. And one of the things I noted was in your conversation with Billy was that you don't miss battling with Skype, and I sort of agree on that point, since trying to get audio correct is a bit of a nightmare. Indeed, I've had some comments on the channel from the quality of the audio, so it's like a daily struggle. And I noted that Skype for desktop recently seems to be going closer to the Windows 10 version, so all the options that I've kind of been used to in Skype, bad as it is or good as it is, depending on your point of view, seem to be going away.
Yeah, no, it's I remember when they started pushing the Windows 10 version here about, I don't know when it was, sometime last year, and I accidentally used it one time, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. So I quickly went back to using the download version, and I think the Windows 10 version is just a way for them to push more ads, which anytime you push more ads into things, that becomes troublesome, and it's pretty annoying. So yeah, Skype, as you know, Skype is Skype, and thank God we got Discord now. Yeah,
Discord, and we're actually we tend to go between both of them, but more so Discord. And I also noted that you talked about Kind of Funny Games, which I noted from before. And maybe you don't know, also there's Colin Moriarty. Colin Moriarty is from Long Island, and Colin Moriarty, him and Greg Miller were best buddies. So Colin Moriarty is now doing his own thing, and it's called Colin's Last Stand and Colin's Last Stand Side Quest, and he's doing a podcast as well. So that's really excellent. So check him out, and I'll send you some links and include some links in the description. And you were also talking about the use of XSplit and OBS, which, to be honest, I don't really have any experience of. And over time, I've also noted that Billy's internet connection has come a very long way, it seems.
Yeah, no, it's great to see that, by the time I bow out of Inside Sim Racing and all of that, Billy goes ahead and finally comes to the I don't know about the 21st century, maybe at least the 20th century, with some real internet connection, because we battle that all the time. So and the real funny thing is Billy lives in a nice area, but it's just one of those deals of you're just so dependent on who your provider is, and everyone has a monopoly these days. And it's kind of a shame. You think about it, and it's probably so many people around the world that want to get into streaming or doing videos or live stuff, and they just can't, because they have cruddy internet. So to some degree, we all kind of got to be thankful, those of us who are able to do it, because it's very easy to just live somewhere and just kind of not have an opportunity. Yeah.
Actually, Jimmy Broadbent and his team in iRacing came second in the Le Mans, 24 Hours of Le Mans on iRacing. And one of his teammates is Stephen Bailey, and people were asking, does Stephen have his live stream? And Stephen doesn't live stream because the internet connection in his home basically doesn't support it. So he basically uploads videos to YouTube when he can, I believe. But he's an amazing driver, but he doesn't have the ability to live stream. And I remember you guys trying to do a show, and you were talking about the time it would take you. And then Billy mentioning during the show that he was actually using his phone at one point. And now I know he mentioned recently that he's invested a lot of money in his internet connection. And Mike, please interject at any point if you have something to ask or say. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sure. Thinking about internet. Yeah, no, I was just thinking about internet connections and how lucky we actually are in North America, because some of my viewers are from Australia and they talk about their struggles. I didn't realize that Australia, for the most part, has, really slow internet. And, some of my creator friends have said, they've created a 10 or 15 minute video. They're starting the upload and it'll be done in a day or something like that. So,
wow.
I didn't know that.
So I think it's far more common to have slower internet in Australia than it is in perhaps Europe or North America. So I think we're pretty lucky where we are.
Yeah. Well, that's ruining my get out of the country plan, because I've always said if I would probably live anywhere else in the world, it'd probably be Australia, because it just kind of seems like a more relaxed version of the U.S., I guess. But I mean, slow internet speeds, I can't do that. I guess I'll stay.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Interesting. Now, John, like I said, I took some notes from your conversation with Billy, and you talked about the NASCAR EA games from 2001, and then that was before Gran Turismo, which you played at a friend's house, and you also mentioned NASCAR Racing 2003. Now, I didn't look this up, but I have a vague memory. Was NASCAR Racing 2003, was that Papyrus, and was that the game that was the origin of iRacing?
Yes, that was Papyrus, which the iRacing team went from when Papyrus got shut down, because what happened was that was the last game released in 2003, and they released a version like 1.1 essentially that allowed it to be modded heavily, because at that point, EA Sports came in and bought the official license to NASCAR, which unfortunately at that time was something that was happening in, a lot of the U.S. sports, football and baseball, a lot of that went that direction. Yeah. And so they bought the official license to NASCAR, so that was the last game that Papyrus could release. So they came out with an update that allowed it to be heavily modded, so even though it was released, it was released in 2003, and also I might add, it was released in like January or February 2003. Yeah. So they were very good at like, here's the new season, here's the new cars you want, instead of like EA Sports that would get to rounds releasing in like September or October. Yeah. But they put it out there, and it had a whole life of its own in the modding community. So by the time I even discovered it, I mean, it was heavily down the road of being modded, and it was people coming out with new car models, since the cars started to change a whole lot there in that 2005, 6, 7 time frame, and they became real aero looking. So I was all over that, and I can't remember the website. I used to spend a lot of time. I think it was a website called superspeedway.net, I think, and that was really big in the community, and I was all in that. And then when iRacing came out, it was really funny, because when iRacing became a thing, they actually put I don't know how they did it, but they essentially tried to really clamp down on the modding.
That's right.
NASCAR Racing 2003, and it became this whole, like, everyone who was in the NR 2003 community was like, you know, we hate iRacing. iRacing's going, and they're clamping this down, and they want to, and there's this game that they're making called iRacing that we haven't seen yet, and there was previews for years and years and years, and so they were clamping down. There wasn't this iRacing to buy, and then on top of it, the whole subscription package was unveiled, and that obviously but people went from a game that was a bunch of free mods and essentially all you gotta do is buy the disc and off you go, to now having to go and do a subscription model. That rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So it was very fascinating to see back then. Now, of course, it didn't really deter me in the end, because it was one of those things where it was like, early on, I was like, oh, why would I get iRacing? It only has a handful of tracks and cars, and why would I leave NASCAR Racing 2003? Yeah. But it became a point where, you know, that modding started getting kind of long in the tooth, and people start falling out. And then also, it was just kind of like, okay, I'm finally ready to see something new here. So they got me early on, but no, it was interesting times back then.
Yeah. That's right. I remember reading about that. There was some kind of legal battle where people had tried to close down the. They took the elements of Papyrus and it became iRacing, and then they had a legal battle, like you said, to stop the modding. And then you mentioned NASCAR Racing 2006, and then you talked about buying a Momo Black Wheel, and you went to Comp USA, and you mentioned actually going to Comp USA where the staff knew their stuff, as opposed to going like some of the stores nowadays, where people don't know anything. And I have found that myself, and I should say that I'm often, I'll say to my wife, if I go to a place and I have to pay a bit more and actually get know-how, I'm actually willing to pay. I think that's kind of, it seems to be the way nowadays. You go to these superstores where there's lots of stuff, lots of stock, but the staff don't necessarily know anything. So I kind of, when you mentioned that, you and Billy talking about a Comp USA also being near where he was, it kind of struck a chord with me, because I've had the same experiences.
Yeah, and I even had that experience this week again, because one of my other hobbies, and it's a hobby I haven't done in, I don't know, probably about 6 years now, is I used to collect a lot of diecast. I had a lot of diecast NASCARs, Jeff Gordon 124 scale cars. Yeah. And then I got into collecting diecast military airplanes. I have an F-22, F-18s. I got a couple of those, F-11s, F-111s. So, I got into that, and I found out from a coworker that around the corner from where I work, there's actually a hobby shop that's what they specialize in, selling essentially, diecast airplanes. They also have some models in there. They have some really cool, like, 90s IndyCar plastic models for you to put together, even though I've kind of given up on those, because anytime I buy that and get super excited, spend a bunch of money, and then I'd make a mess of it. So I've just gone straight to, okay, I'll just buy an already finished model that's made of metal. So, but no, there's one of those around the corner, and I mean, they're pricing wise, they do look like they're a little more expensive than what I bought them on the past online. Yeah. But it's like the guy in there is super knowledgeable, and is like, hey, I can get you this plane and this livery and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, okay, I think I might need to pick this up again, and if I'm gonna pick it up again, I'll come see you, just because I can't believe that there's a physical store for, this another very niche hobby out there in the world.
Absolutely, yeah. And you can actually go in and have a conversation with the guy. Yeah, that's kind of nice. And then you mentioned, I laughed at this, you mentioned GTR2 on a laptop at college on a foldable table with a 16:9 19-inch screen. That made me laugh. And you also talked about the fact that you spend so much time in college watching TV. But I thought to myself, maybe that was like you were watching TV instead of being out drinking and chasing girls. But I thought maybe you were perhaps a lot safer, if I could put it that way.
Really, the TV was just detrimental to my schoolwork. Yeah. I was not a very good student, and I worked a little bit in the industry when I was like in high school with some local places around here. So, you talk to the engineers there, and it's like, do these 4 calculus classes have to take matter? And they're like, I've been an engineer for 25 years, and I've never used calculus one day in my life.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, I went in there kind of ruined. So let's just say I was trying to more or less just get through my 4 years and get out working.
Yeah.
And I did that by the skin of my teeth for the most part.
Yeah. I think that's the same for everybody. How about you, Mike? How about your college days?
I actually partied away my college days. Fresh out of high school, I just decided that I was going to sort of enjoy life and travel a bit. And then it took me a further 10, 12 years back. So I'm an example of what not to do. But I eventually did do it, and I went back and finished school. So, just added a little decade of partying in there. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a very expensive party when you go that route. So I tell people if I meet someone in high school, I'm like, if you're not ready for college, please don't do it. You can go out and party much cheaper.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, especially with the price of colleges in the States now and so on. So.
Yeah, but I will say, boys and girls, even though I barely made it through college with my C for a degree. I guess that was what I lived by. It can come back and bite you, because right before, let's see, I'm trying to get the timeline straight. So I went out to work inside sim racing in 2015.
Yeah.
About a year earlier, I interviewed with SpaceX.
Oh, did you?
Out in LA.
Really?
And I had a coworker who I worked with, and she eventually got a job at SpaceX, and she put my name in. And I interviewed, and it's like a 5-round interview process. It's the most extreme interview I've ever done. You have like 2 phone interviews, and then you have an on-site interview, and then you have another interview with like the manager of the whole facility. And then the 5th interview, you get your package of your, like, you know, who you are and all this information, all the notes from the prior interviews that goes to the leadership team, including Elon Musk, who review it. And I guess he's like heavily involved in all that stuff. Yeah. And everything I'd done up to that point was all very positive. The on-site was positive. I got the 4th interview with the site manager, and he's like, you know, I'm calling you because I have to, but I've only heard good things from the team. It sounded like we could really use your expertise. And then I got to the 5th interview, and I didn't get the job. And I really think it was my GPA. Like, they had a lot of guys, like, my GPA in college was like a 2.8 or something. Not very good. And, like, they pretty much only hire people with, like, 3.4, 3.5, you know, range. So, it can come back and hurt you. Now, in hindsight, I don't know how much I was looking forward to going out there and working like 70, 80 hours a week and spending $1,000 to rent a room at a house towards the beach. But I mean, you know, it might have been fun being out in LA. Yeah. So yep, again, don't watch TV in school.
But on a tangent, Musk is an interesting guy. I mean, he sold he's from South Africa. He sold his first game. He developed he wrote a game at age 11. He's some kind of like child prodigy, I believe, and then like he's all commented recently like I don't care what your college degree is. I just want to see what you're currently working on. So he seems to kind of go with the flow, and he seems to maybe say a lot of things and then perhaps retract. But that's interesting, because it seems that from his recent comments, he's not so much interested in what you've done in college. It's like more so what you're doing now, or what you've previously created. So that's kind of interesting.
Yes, which was my point, and that's kind of what I told the hiring manager when she was putting my package together. I'm kind of like, I had read similar comments, but what I didn't realize at the time, I think he had like gone to college like for 2 degrees and like had dropped out because he was so brilliant. So I don't know, maybe he was looking for a little more flash of brilliance, but I don't know. I was trying to have my work speak for itself, but I guess it wasn't good enough, or maybe it's something else. You never know.
But I think he, in a way, sorry, I'm on a tangent now, but he's kind of like Jeff Bezos. He'll say things and then promise things, and the engineers behind will go, no, that's not possible, you know. So he's kind of, you know, he's kind of like that. So he seems to shoot from the hip in a way, I suppose. Go on.
Oh, I was gonna say he's a true eccentric billionaire.
Absolutely.
I mean, it is. He says a bunch of stuff, and whatever, you know, what's true and what's not. you'll time will tell.
Yeah, yeah. Like the guy who built the Spruce Goose. What's his name? The aircraft designer. Oh,
Howard Hughes.
Howard Hughes,
Yes.
exactly. Yeah, thank you, Mike. And you talked about Snapchat and how it's apparently dying. I saw read an article recently how it's kind of dying a little bit compared to Instagram stories and so on. And then you mentioned R Factor, the original R Factor, and the wrecking due to bad netcode. And then you got into, I have notes here, got into iRacing, and you bought an Oboto rig and triple screens and a G27. And then you had gone back to school and got an MBA. I didn't know that, John. That was interesting.
Yeah, I'm clearly overqualified for playing video games.
Perhaps, yeah.
I guess, I don't know, but I mean, some of that NBA stuff still kind of comes into, especially like inside sim racing, where so much of that was running a business.
Yes,
and,
true.
You know, trying to track down sponsors. You know, there's so much more to it than what you see from the YouTube or the website
Absolutely.
side of things. But
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I got my MBA. You know, it's one of those things where I don't know how much I even use it these days, but I guess it looks good on the resume.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who's doing one. Or he's in the process of completing it, and he's a very smart guy. And I think many people do it. You know, no matter what the industry you're in, and it kind of it's also, I believe it's a form of networking as well, and you know, like you said, it's kind of widening your, how would I say, portfolio in a way. So definitely it was a good thing to do. And I realized as well, I had forgotten about Jason Dunnington as well. That's weird. You mentioned his name, and I thought, hold on a second, now I remember him actually. That's strange.
Yeah, he was a quick flash in the pan there. He wasn't around long, but he made quite the impact on the community as a whole. Like I said, I'm pretty sure the last video I saw, I know he started his own channel, and after he did like the "Why I Left Inside Sim Racing" pretty clickbaity thing video, he had a video of like one of his buddies coming over and talking about aliens, which was something. Which I think there's aliens and stuff like that. I mean, I don't mind that, but this was getting into like some real out there conspiracy stuff,
Area 51 stuff, yeah.
Yeah. So it was, which, well, I mean, you say that, I don't even necessarily push back too much against that. I mean, there's a lot of fascinating things that go on in secret. But yeah, it was something else, and it definitely was interesting.
Yeah. And then you talked about, you started at Inside Sim Racing and you were doing hardware reviews, and then you had to learn how to create videos, which is in a sense what I've been doing as well, and like the video, the audio elements, and many of us. And actually recently I had bought this, do you remember the Trustmaster Ferrari Alcantara Integral? It sounds very fancy, and I bought that set because it was a recommendation by you and Darren. You did a review of it. And then I ended up going through 3 wheelbases because I had 2 failures. And then I'm actually on my 3rd T300 wheelbase now, although Billy hasn't had any issues. And then I made a video of the issues I experienced, and actually in the video I included a clip of you and Darren actually recommending the wheel. So I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things we would hear that a lot. It's like, and we would try to say on all different wheels, it's like we're not quality control long-term testing.
No.
Now, I don't think I've never had a wheel fail. I had on, I think it was the Thrustmaster TX. It had that weird what was it for? It's for the Xbox, where it had the special cord.
Yes.
That could be like turned on or off. I don't remember how that all worked. So I had that. I had one of those go on the fritz for us, and Darren had another cable laying around, so that took care of that. But yeah, no, it's quality issues happen. People would always ask, it's like, what brand has more quality issues? And I mean, it was pretty even across the board, I felt like, especially by the time I got done with Thrustmaster and Fanatec, and even Logitech with the G29 and 920.
Yeah.
The G25 and 27, we used to never hear anything about those. Those wheels were just like rock solid, but for whatever reason, when it went to the 29 and the 920, those started creeping in and started hearing some quality issues about those. So yeah, it's something that always happens, and all I can say is hopefully the whole process of getting a new wheel is as simple as possible. But I will say, going back to that Ferrari 599 wheel, I felt mine the other day, and that still is probably the nicest feeling material.
The Alcantara,
of any wheel, the Alcantara of any wheel I have here, including someone like the Sparco Alcantara they use. I mean that 599 wheel is just sweet feeling.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, and it says it on the box. It says the Alcantara is made in the same factory where you make the Alcantara for the wheels and the actual cars. It's kind of like a branding thing. And then you mentioned, now this was funny. You said you bought because I remember you were building your AMD based PC. You bought a Nvidia GTX 1080 Ti before the Bitcoin boom. And then you sold that, and you bought two GTX 1070s, and then you sold those and you made some money. And then you bought another 1080 Ti with a Ryzen 7 system. So I remember you did the video of building the AMD based system. So how did that work out for you, John?
So actually, to clarify, I had the 1070. I had both 1070s, and then I bought the 1080 Ti, and then I sold the 1070. So I've only ever had one 1080 Ti.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean it was, I don't know, disappointing. I don't know if that's the word. I mean, the 1080 Ti is definitely super powerful. I went with an EVGA version, and I got a little bit of an overclock on it. And unfortunately, I had to buy they have these detuned versions now that are if you see the product description online, it says DT at the end of it, and detune means that essentially you're not supposed to overclock it because it's one that like didn't perform great at the factory through the silicone lottery when they built the cards. So, but again, it was right when the prices were just going nuts, and all the other ones are sold out, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna buy it, and then I don't even know if it was the next day or the next morning they were sold out of them, and then all the cards were just stupid expensive. So, but even with that said, I have gotten it to overclock moderately, and I mean, it's still a lot more powerful than a 1070 is. But I mean, yeah, with my triple screen, the BAT setup, it still isn't pushing quite as many pixels as I was hoping it would. So, I've had to kind of mess around with some stuff and get things a little better. And then also, it hasn't performed quite as good in VR as I was hoping. And Mike, I will say, I saw a little bit of your video of talking about VR and what it's like after some time, and yeah, it's kind of one of those things where I was really hoping the 1080 Ti would be the savior, but hey, it's okay because Nvidia's about to today or tomorrow, I think, launch their next version of cards, and I'm sure I'll get all excited.
Is it happening now? Because sorry, I got kind of confused because they were talking about this RTX, and I thought they were talking about these Quadro cards for workstations, and then there would be a delay, and then they'll talk about the GTX range. Is it so they're going to announce them now?
I briefly looked at it, but I think the 2080 is announced tomorrow, so the 20th of August.
Okay.
And I did see the technical specs for it. It's a bit over my head, but it's, from what I could see in sort of the comments on Reddit, it doesn't look like it's going to blow the 1080 out of the water, but it is sort of the next step. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah, and the guys on the Linus Tech Tips show, the WAN show, I listened to that yesterday morning. They were speculating that maybe it's the Pascal chipset with maybe this ray tracing components added or something. We'll have to see. Actually, back to you, Mike, because you weren't here for the hardware discussion, and one of the things I realized on out of respect for you, Mike, I'd forgotten to mention it because we talked about the T300. Now, you were on a T300, and then you bought the AccuForce, and was it Black Friday you bought that, wasn't it so? You kind of jumped the gun and went to direct drive, wasn't it so? Yeah.
It was, yes. Yeah. So I raced with a T300 for a long time, and I had zero issues with it. And that's kind of the most common question I get asked when I talk about the T300 is, did yours break down? I think there's just a large vocal, well, not a large, but a pretty vocal minority that has had issues about the T300, and maybe it relates back to Thrustmaster's customer service. Seems like there are quite a few people that have, taken to the internet to say how much they hate their T300 because it broke down on, day 10, and then they couldn't get a replacement, whatever it was. But I actually had no issues with it, and I still use it on my PS4, and I to this day have no issues with it. But yeah, I got in on Black Friday and got the direct drive wheel, and it's hard to imagine ever going back, quite frankly. It just feels, and I think so this in my video, but it feels like you're using an actual piece of hardware as opposed to a toy. It's an industrial motor with a steering wheel bolted to it effectively. And you feel because I'm a pretty big guy, and it just feels like you can do whatever you want to this thing and it's not going to break. And so it kind of makes the whole point about reliability kind of moot. It's just that good.
Yeah. And you're running a 1070 or 1080, Mike? Which one did you have? Which one is it?
I'm running a 1080. My computer has always had issues. I tried to do my first home build, and it's been running somewhat consistent lately, but in retrospect, I probably should have gone with a pre-built. But no, I'm running the 1080, and probably no plans to upgrade. I just there's no need. Game. Yeah. The only game that kind of give anything video-wise is a set. Of course, I'm still having drop frames, and I thought it might have been my video card, but I'm not convinced about that anymore. I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. Until I have no plans to go with triples or anything like that, so it's fine. The 1080 is fine. Obviously, the TI, like you, John, would be a step up, but I don't see myself going that way anytime soon. Although I will say, if you're going to buy a video card time, because Bitcoin and all associated cryptocurrencies are tanking, so it's actually come down a lot in the past few months.
That's true. Maybe the market was going to be flooded with kind of used Pascal-based GPUs, but of course you have to be careful in case you end up buying something that's maybe burnt out from using Bitcoins and so on.
Exactly. It would be a massive grain of salt if you saw somebody selling all of a sudden 1080 Ti. I think that'd be warned that he's probably overworked those things for the past year.
Most probably. And I actually, back to John, I have this EVGA branded 970. It's overclocked, but in terms of overclocking, I haven't got a clue. I'd be terrified to do it because I might burn out the card or something, But
well, thankfully there's enough information out there. Like overclocking myself, I get a little bit nervous on it. But there's I like to use the website. I think it's guru3d.com.
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
I like them a lot. I've read that site for for at least a decade now, and they always do a good job of overclock. I think it's also overclockers.net or something like that. So I always try to go and search. What makes it kind of tough sometimes is trying to find the overclock for your exact card.
Yes,
because it's not. There's a little bit of deviation between the manufacturers when it comes to a 1080 Ti or whatever card. But I don't. It's not too bad. I like to use Afterburner from MSI, and I tend to. That's one of the few programs I have that I allow to start up when Windows starts up, because it doesn't have too much of an impact on startup speed and all of that stuff, and it's not evasive. I when I got Discord, not that long ago, I went and. Of course, when you install something brand new these days, it does a thing where it automatically starts with Windows, and I got it popping up, and it's like, no, get out of here. And I really try to be specific. Now, one thing that Mike was bringing up with the AccuForce is one thing that is nice about having the Sim Commander software that I do like is when you launch a profile, you can have other things open. So I got set up where when I launch that, I have the Z1 dashboard that I have launches that software, and then also like trading paints for iRacing. Since I always forget to launch that, and then you're in a race, you're like, why does everything look all plain? Oh, because I don't have trading paints open. So no, that is one thing that is nice, because remembering to open up all the ancillary software, especially in sim racing where there's so many different little pieces of software out there these days, is always kind of annoying.
Yeah. Actually, and the one thing is it also depends on the amount of RAM you have, and then you could start PC with maybe 5 or 10 things running, and then something could crash and maybe crash the whole PC. And actually, I run the Pit Crew app. What's it called? The Crew Chief. Sorry. I run the Crew Chief app, and then I run this Voice Attack app, and I run 2 or 3 others, and then I kind of have to remember to do it. So it's like I spend like 20 minutes setting up, and then I like 10 minutes actually racing. So it seems to be,
Well, yeah, and that is one of my kind of pet peeves sometimes when it comes to sim racing. Especially these days, I'm just so busy with home life and stuff.
Yeah,
I'll be working on a home project, and I'll be getting grumpy, which is normally how that always goes. And my wife's like, just go race for a little bit. I go, okay. And then I get over, and it's like
a free pass.
15, 20 minutes later after I go and I hit press all the toggles and the buttons and switches, and I pull levers. It's I can eventually get into a session, and then I'll get into like the other day I jumped into just run some laps in iRacing with a new Indy car at Pocono, and I go in there, and for whatever reason I've been having this issue. My paddle shifters weren't being detected. And I got it set up now with my AccuForce, where I got the Sim Racing Machines adapter, and I have the Fanatec Universal Hub on there, and then I got a Sparco F10 steering wheel, which is a real steering wheel they came out with this year, and I put it on there. And once in a while, I'll jump in, and it just won't detect it, and I gotta like shut down the computer. Normally, I just plug in the cord, the USB cord, into a different slot, and then it remembers and everything works, and the button box essentially works again. So it's like, okay, I just wanted to come in here and turn some laps and maybe tweak a little on the setup, or at least just kind of see where where the baseline's at, and I can't do that because I'm fussing around and turn the computer off, and 20-30 minutes later. So yeah, those are the things that sometimes drive me nuts. Where it's like,
why do we bother?
All these little toys, it did used to be simple, and I do understand. People always ask about console versus PC gaming. And I don't think I ever made a video of this. I really did want for a long time do a pros and cons type thing. And it's like there's definitely pros to just turning on the console, and you got what you got, and off you go. You don't have to fuss around with all these other things that we bring on ourselves, which tends to be direct drive wheels and triple screens and VR. When you're racing on the console, it's hooked up to the TV, and off you go. So there's definitely some pros there, and I kind of want to get back. I talked a little bit with Billy, but I like to get back to running Gran Turismo Sport more, and I kind of need to get a setup. I like to have my PC setup that I have, and then I really eventually, and I don't know when it's going to be, but it's eventually, like to get more of a console setup here in my kind of the man cave room. So if I do want to do that, I can just jump into a race and really give it no extra thought. Yeah.
Now, see, there's the thing, because there's a guy, Mike will know who I'm talking about, Tim the Toolman, and Mike will know who Tim is, and Tim has left comments on the podcast, and I think it was Tim who asked for, can we have a discussion on console versus PC. Now that I'm thinking about like what we just discussed, like the time it takes, maybe to build a PC, maybe swap out components and start all the apps, and then like the console can be so easy, like you said. So, and then the fact that you mentioned it, and I made note that you're running this AccuForce with the Sparco F10 rim and the Trustmaster handbrake, and then so if you have the direct drive wheel, and this is also to Mike, if you have a direct drive wheel which basically requires a PC, but yet you want to maybe build up the console setup so you can just have time just to maybe jump into like Assetto Corsa or GT Sport or Forza, how do you then, if you go from the direct drive to the kind of the custom setup, are you losing something then? You gain time by having more time to play on the console because it's simpler, but are you losing something in terms of the experience because you can't use the same hardware you're using on the PC, if you know what I mean?
Oh, Mike, I'll let you go first.
Sure. Yeah, sure. You're giving something up, but I try not to be too, I guess, about my sim racing hardware. Like, I know, let's kind of jump topics here, but VR, okay? I love VR. I have VR. I run VR off. I'm not somebody who can't go, and it's the same with my wheel. Yes, I have a direct drive wheel, and it's awesome. But if for some reason tomorrow I had to sell it, or it broke down or whatever, and I had to go with my T300, I think I would be perfectly honest. I guess it's also because I don't compete. I'm not, a high-level racer where everything has to be perfect and spot on with what I expect out of a system. I try and just make it a fun hobby above all else. So I don't mind one bit. So to sort of answer your question, if I'm going to jump on the PS4, or if I had, perhaps a rig dedicated to sort of fun racing as opposed to competitive racing, and I had, old wouldn't bother me too much, but I know there are people who, now that they have direct drive, they'll never race anything else. Now that they have VR, they'll never go back to pancake racing, as they call it, or anything like that. I'm not of that mindset, really. Again, it's just fun for me. It's the same reason I can enjoy Gran Turismo Sport, the same reason I can enjoy Project Cars 2. I mean, do they feel as good through the wheel as R Factor 2? No, if I'm speaking honestly, no, they don't. It kind of feels numb compared to R Factor 2 or Automobilista or something like that, but I don't let that get in the way of my fun. Yeah, I just try and enjoy sim racing as a hobby, and again, I'm not competitive, so maybe I have a different mindset than most people, but I try not to be too elitist about it and just kind of enjoy the experience however it comes to me.
I agree with that. Also, well, what's funny, you made the comment of not being as competitive. I mean, I do feel like probably some of your most vocal people when it comes to things like high-end hardware are probably people that aren't like that quick. I feel like a lot of people who are like very good tend to do it on very generic or older equipment.
True.
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah.
All day long. So yeah, there's definitely. I feel like like we talked about earlier, with when people have issues, there's a vocal minority. I think there's a vocal minority of people who are peddling the narrative on super high-end hardware and how amazing it is, and then terms of how many people are out there racing more generic stuff, or people who are fast racing more generic stuff. Now, with that said, it's something we always try to get across on the show with Inside Sim Racing is, higher end equipment does feel nicer. Like I have the AccuForce, I got all the wheels here, I have the AccuForce on here because it's a direct drive wheel and it feels, it's amazing. But I mean, there's definitely, I'm not going to say you can't go and enjoy sim racing with lesser hardware, and that was always a really tough juxtaposition with the show. Is you try to review the hardware for people who are interested in buying it, because even say if it's $1,000 direct drive wheel, a good percentage, the majority percentage of your audience is automatically wiped out probably just from the cost alone. But there is a percentage who can afford it, and they are looking for a legit review and trying to decide if they're going to spend their money on it. So it's hard. So you have to go and, it might be something where you're like, me personally, I would never spend that much money, or I can't spend that much money, what have you. But there's people that can, and they want a legit review, and you can't go and just be kind of flippant about it and be like, it's great, but this is way too expensive. You know, it's a major con. You gotta, you know, give from a perspective of someone who's in the marketplace and say, okay, well, I mean, is the price and performance good enough for someone who's shopping in this range of X dollars? So, but also, besides that tangent, back to the main point, it is kind of, I do struggle a lot with my sim setup in terms of compatibility between PC and the console. So, you know, for a long time I had Thrustmaster wheels on my rig, and I had the PS4, like when we reviewed Gran Turismo Sport, I had that on my primary setup playing through my center monitor. I had it right next to my PC mounted on the wall here. Yep. And it was nice to only have one rig in one area where I could play PC and consoles. Well, now that I've gone to the direct drive wheel and having that full time on my rig and trying to get away from all the swapping out of hardware that I used to do, that was a major pain in the butt.
Yeah.
To do that swapping out all the time. Now I don't have that option. So now if I want to go race them like that, I gotta go set it up on another rig and roll over to the TV. Now, in my position, I have multiple rigs. I'm up to my eyeballs in rigs. I'm looking to get rid of some hardware to make some space here. So, you know, I'm a bit spoiled in terms of that. But, you know, maybe it's a rig that I'd rather race on my primary rig. I'd rather not be on a secondary one. So that's what makes kind of what Fanatec's doing with their direct drive wheels kind of interesting, because they're going to have the PlayStation and Xbox compatibility.
Yes.
So that makes it interesting for someone who maybe plays a little bit of everything and wants to you know, have a wheel that can do it all. Because you know, that also becomes a consideration in the price. I mean, those. I haven't paid too much attention to it, but the Fanatec direct drive wheels seem to be, you know, they're pricey. You know, they're getting up over $1,000. But, you know, maybe if that saves you from the hassle of having to go and swap out wheels, or maybe get a different rig or what have you, maybe that's more worth it to you. So there's so many things to consider in this, and unfortunately, the manufacturers, they take advantage of whether or not you're a PC or you're a console player for the most part. You know, there's a lot of licensing stuff that goes on that kind of forces you to buy this wheelbase or buy two wheelbases if you want to run on everything. Yeah. And that part kind of, I mean, I get it. I get it from a business standpoint, but it does kind of suck for the consumer.
Yeah, it's like Sony, it's like Trustmaster making a GT branded wheel for the PlayStation and so on, that maybe is maybe PlayStation only, or maybe PlayStation and on PC. I guess back to the original question, console versus PC, like Tim the Toolman had suggested. I guess I posed the question. It's a kind of a tough question to ask, and a tough question to answer rather, because it's kind of open-ended and it's different for everybody. And I guess to start with, the software, like the games on the console, can be so different. I mean, in most cases, there's no modding, and like Assetto Corsa on PC, the console versions came out so much more later, and maybe the force feedback maybe isn't as good, and then the DLC comes out later, and like, for example, the original Dirt Rally came out later, so you're you know, maybe you're losing some elements on console that you're not getting on PC, and they're like never the twain shall meet, so to speak. I guess they're just different, and that's just the way they are. So there is no definite answer whether one is better than the other or comparison. They're just different, and that's just the way it is, I suppose.
Yeah, no, it being the very complicated landscape of sim racing in terms of hardware, software, and then also, the hardware you play it on, definitely creates a lot of point of discussions, which kept me employed for a while. So
that's true. That's very true.
If it was easy, what would we talk about?
Yeah, that is true. Now, a segue directly to Fanatec. Now, you mentioned the Fanatec launch. Now, there's the Fanatec DD1 and there's the Fanatec VLVR. Now, we talked about this in the hardware discussion we had with Alex from the Extra Mile and Billy, and I wanted to talk about this as a as a discussion point, because in a way you're kind of getting back into things in a way, John, and the fact that you guys are both using AccuForce wheels, and the fact that Mike was not here for the hardware discussion. So what do you guys think about the Fanatec direct drive wheel? There's the DD1, the DD2, the Field VR. What do you guys think, or are you interested in looking at them, or how are you kind of keeping up? And it seems to me that the direct drive wheel launch from Fanatec, it was a bit kind of fuzzy, because there was this kind of auction based thing, and then the Field VR thing that was kind of based on crowdfunding. So what did you guys think?
The Field VR thing, I'm fairly, I don't know, skeptical is the word. I definitely have a lot of questions. Now, they did reach out to me about trying it out when they came, and they did I guess a little tour of the US. But at that point, I was kind of on my way out. So I didn't take him up on that. And it also would have been a good amount of travel for me. So, yeah, I kind of, there's two thoughts. I mean, I've seen a couple of the videos, and I do worry a little bit from a production standpoint. I mean, as a R&D type wheel, I think it's a great idea. You know, the 3D printing's cool. But then again, I look at it and I'm like, this looks very 3D printed. It looks very 3D printed. It's also, it's not the most attractive wheel I've seen. You know, a lot of times less is more. And it doesn't, as they say in making cars, it doesn't cost any more money to make a pretty car than it is to make an ugly car. Yep. And so you might as well make something that looks nice. And then lastly, I don't know why they're doing pedals with it, because the pedals didn't seem the best. And I don't know, it just makes so much more sense, in my opinion, to just focus on making a good wheelbase. Maybe you just more or less look at the wheelbase. You don't worry, and maybe you come out with a cheaper steering wheel like they got, and then let people mod from there, like you see a lot, especially on the OSW side. But yeah, so that was a little odd. Fanatec wise, I haven't spent a whole lot of time looking at it. I mean, it's one of those things where, like everyone else now, I'll just kind of wait to see what the reviews say, and when it gets out there in the wild, I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's really being released until like the end of the year. Yeah, and you mentioned
December.
Yeah, December, and you mentioned this, John, and I noticed, wasn't it so that they have console compatibility for the DD1 and DD2?
Yeah, and I mean, Mike, do you have more insight in on how it all? I know they can do both, but it's one of those things where it's like one or the other, or maybe it's a steering wheel that you have to buy.
I think, and I could be wrong about this, I'm trying to recall when the launch was, but I believe there's a console only, or maybe a PS4 only version that hasn't yet been detailed. I could be wrong about that, though.
It's interesting, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, and I did see.
Yeah. Go on, John.
I did see on their website. On their website, they have a picture. I looked at it last week of it's kind of like a grayed out image, and it's the one of the direct drive wheels. I don't remember which one it is, and then it has a formula looking steering wheel attached to it that I think is the one that's supposed to be PS4 compatible. So that hasn't been unveiled yet. I think I clicked on it, and the link it's a dead link. So maybe that's what you're getting at there, Mike. But yeah, it's. I don't know. We'll see when it's kind of out there in the wild. I mean, I will say I talked to Thomas at E3 2017, so we're talking about 14 months ago. Yep. And he was talking about how they were developing the direct drive wheel and just how challenging it was. And I think the biggest challenge was the mechanism of using, or at least the concept of using, the current steering wheels they have available, which I think was definitely a very important thing, because you have all these wheels out there that people have, so that makes it a lot more attractive to folks who already are in the Fanatec universe. Yeah. And then they wanted to do it without having the cable that you see on, pretty much all the other direct drive wheels, including, the AccuForce originally wasn't supposed to have a cable, but there were some issues with the non-cabled version and the transmission of all electronics via just the steering wheel. So that would be very slick to achieve both of them. I think I saw part of their video. If you use a current wheel, they have another locking mechanism But anyway, Thomas was going on how tough it is to, like, also from like somewhat of like a regulatory standpoint, because they're selling this wheel to the masses, and a mass-produced product has to, it can't break your wrist. All of a sudden.
That's true.
So there was a big safety aspect in all of that as well. So clearly that development's gone much further than I think he was looking. I think they were shooting for more like end of last year to release it. Now here we are pushing out another year and all that cost of R&D and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot to it. And it'll be interesting to see what comes of it and how it's received by everyone. I know there's been some comments based on the price and how much it is, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it's somewhat in line with everything else. But I'll be waiting like everyone else.
And I guess it's a question whether a console player would be willing to spend $1,000 or more on a wheel. I suppose not. I don't know, but
I think
go on, Mike. Sorry,
in that case, sure. So I think they would, and I think what we forget as PC sim racers is just how big the console world is.
True.
Like I can't remember what Gran Turismo Sport just passed, but I want to say it was 5 million copies sold or something like that. And so when you have a base that large, there's going to be some outliers. There's going to be a percentage of outliers who want the best wheel available. And so even if it's 1% of that 5 million users, that's still a huge amount of units you're going to be potentially selling. So like it's 10-to-1 or something, Gran Turismo Sport active users versus Assetto Corsa or something like that. So it's not a segment they can ignore, really.
No.
And just real quick on the Fanatec wheel, it is compatible with Xbox One. It's not going to be compatible with PS4 until the third direct drive base.
Okay, DD3.
See, that's something that Fanatec has done for a while. That's kind of interesting. You brought up Thrustmaster with the two different bases. It's like Fanatec does the same thing, but then if you have like this steering wheel, you can get it to work with like the CSL. You got it where you can buy the PS4 CSL and work with the PS4 and the PC. And then if you buy this steering wheel, it can work with the Xbox One compatible. It's a fascinating thing. And then for the longest time, Fanatec Remember when I think it was with the CSW where it could with the Universal Hub where it could work on both consoles and the PC, and then they got kind of slapped in the wrist because they were kind of doing that unofficially for Sony, and Sony didn't like that. Yeah. So there's been a lot of there's been a history of games that play trying to get this all to work, and like I said earlier, even though it is more beneficial to the wheel makers, a lot of it does also come down to can be blamed on the relationship between Sony and Microsoft, and especially Sony. Sony on a lot of other general games I know is kind of anti cross-platform, so that
the whole
creates
Fortnite
issues.
thing. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. That creates issues down to the hardware side as well.
Yeah, and I guess they wouldn't be making it if there wasn't a market there, like you said. Even a 1% of 5 million is still something. And I'm thinking now, if the Xbox One is a series of virtual Windows 10 PCs kind of grouped together, I guess the drivers on Windows could in a sense be modded for Windows 10, so it should work. Hey, there's a noob question, if you don't mind me asking. On the AccuForce, do you have a big like red stop button, like to stop it in case? Like Jimmy Broadbent has talked about this, like on a industrial motor, there's a cut-off button. Do you have that on the AccuForce wheels?
It comes with an inline switch.
Yeah.
It's very discreet. There's no big red button that's included with the V, but I mean it would be a matter of a cutoff switch. It would just be a matter of going to your local electrical supplier and wiring it up. I don't think it would be a big thing to have some sort of disconnect. But no, it just comes with a basic inline toggle switch. Yeah,
I guess. Go on, John. Sorry.
I was going to say I have been a little interested from OSW users if anyone's ever actually used it. Yeah, because I've never had a time where like the AccuForce has freaked out on me and seen any kind of reason to need a kill switch.
Yes.
Or button in that case. So it is fascinating how there's always one on pretty much every OSW sold, and then how much is it used, or is that just how they started up instead of having an inline switch?
Yeah.
I think it's probably an insurance thing.
Yeah.
Would be my guess. Just because, as we alluded to earlier, this thing does have the potential to sprain, if not break, wrists. I mean, if you went crazy with your settings and had, a 20 Newton meter motor dialed up all the way, you could potentially damage a wrist. So I think probably for insurance purposes, they would recommend that you have that big red switch, and if something went wrong, they could at least fight it in court and say, well, did you press the red switch to turn the machine off? Something like that. That would be my guess. I'm guessing lawyers had something to do with that.
I just remember Jimmy Broadbent unboxing his OSW, and he had this big cut-off switch that you would see, for example, like in a factory on a conveyor or something. And I wondered, and it comes back to the fact that John mentioned the strength of the Fanatec system, although it would be less, I guess, than an OSW or an AccuForce, but the strength would still be there. Now, in the interest of time, Mike, you had some questions for John.
Yeah, sure. And I apologize, John. I got to jump off a bit early here, but to ask you a few questions. Sorry. Relating to sort of your ISR days, and I don't want to dwell on this too much because obviously you've moved on to bigger and better things, but do you miss having a public voice? And I know you're still somewhat into sim racing, perhaps not as much as at one point in your life, but do you miss having that public voice? And then when a game is updated or, a new title is released, do you miss being able to share opinions on?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think I'm I mean, it's probably true for a lot of people. I mean, you see how popular, comments are and social media, and isn't that all of us just trying to yell our opinion out into the void of space and hope someone hears it. So no, I'm no different or better. No, I definitely miss being able to go and give my 2 cents and try to give, at least in my opinion, I think a fairly objective look at it. At least that's what I was always trying to go at. I mean, of course, it is my opinion, so I guess it is subjective naturally. But no, I do miss it, and that was something I got touched on with a little bit with talking to Billy. I mean, that was always a tough thing that I don't think I ever quite did the best with the show. Is at the end of the day, people are there to watch you and hear your opinion to some degree. And spending all the time that I did on making very pretty videos and all the filming and editing that entailed, probably it mattered, and it's definitely people appreciate that. But maybe at the end of the day, just sharing my opinion was would have been an easier way to go. So no, I definitely miss that, and I think all the time about how I could get back into it in a let's say a less, I guess, life-impacting way now that I have a full-time job and a family and stuff like that, and I can't dedicate all my time to that alone.
And I was going to ask you about that, actually, because, I think I have perhaps a similar life to your own. I don't know too much about you personally, but, I'm a husband and a father, and I have a full-time job and things like that, and so I can't even really make time to build my iRacing career because my sim racing time is, I would say, I usually get time on Saturday and Sunday mornings, and then maybe a half hour before I go to bed. How much time do you allow yourself for sim racing, or how much do you, how often do you get to sit down in front of your rig?
It hasn't been a whole lot the last 6 months. Now, I will say I have some opportunity to get time because like you said, it's just trying to find time where you have it. And we did a little bit of an ISR TV league last year, and I think we were racing Tuesday nights, and Monday and Tuesday nights work out well for me. My wife, she works at a local hospital here as a physical therapist, and she works kind of strange hours. She has every Wednesday and Friday off, and then she works every other weekend. So on those weekends that she's working, I mean, especially Saturday and Sunday mornings, and before I started Inside Sim Racing, Saturday and Sunday mornings were always kind of my racing time. I get in, I try to run, especially in iRacing. Those tend to be some of the best turnout and things like the IndyCar or GT3, and even for a little bit I ran the Lotus 79 for a while, and there was a very small but dedicated hardcore bunch, and your strength of field races, or essentially just races that would go official, had to be Saturday and Sunday morning East Coast time in the US. So yeah, those are times where I like to race, and there are times I'm hoping to race more. Right now I've been just up to my eyeballs in house projects, and we've pretty much redoing the house floor to ceiling, and it's been a major time suck, and it's one of those things where I'm trying to like bang that out right now so then I can get back to sim racing at a future date. That's probably a challenge, maybe not the best plan, because other things always inevitably come up, but that's what I'm shooting for. But I mean, with that said, I am trying to get a little more carve out time here and there, and I gotta do better on those my quote unquote off weekends for myself of jumping on and racing for a few hours when I get the time.
And last question, and then unfortunately I got to jump off here, but it's kind of a two-part question. Pardon me, I'm sorry. Technical challenges notwithstanding, because you made reference both on earlier in this podcast and on about how you had challenges with Skype and how things have sort of progressed on that front. So the two-part question is, what were the biggest challenges at ISR outside of the technical? Like, was it was it getting sponsors? Was it dealing with the manufacturers? Was it dealing with your fan base, or what sort of things did you face? And second part of that question, how are you parlaying those lessons into sort of your future in sim racing? If you build your own channel or have a website or anything like that, how have those lessons at ISR translated into what you plan on doing in the future with sim racing?
That's a good question. I'll note a couple challenges. I mean, the fan interaction was somewhat of a challenge to keep up on. We get so many emails a day, and I try my best to respond to them. And then also, the comment section. And then, the comment section, we talk about vocal minorities. You get a lot of that on YouTube, and there was definitely times where I probably paid too much attention to that. Now, there's definitely times where, you put out a video and you know what is good work and what isn't your best work. And there's times where you get feedback and you're like, yeah, I deserve that. I see where you're coming at there. But no, I mean, there's definitely times where I struggled. I think there was a point where I kind of started easing up on reviews, both software and hardware, because it's like, there's people that are legitimately trying, their livelihood depends on this, and they're trying to do their best, and they just didn't get it. And then there's also points perspective of, especially on the game side, just because I don't like it doesn't mean you shouldn't like it. I'm going to point out these reasons, again, try to like objectively point this out. But, if you love a game, go love a game. It's not for me to stop you from something that you enjoy. And then there was other times, based on kind of like feedback and stuff, where then I tried to hit something a little bit harder. I look back at a bunch of reviews we did last year. Project Cars 2 is probably a perfect example where I enjoyed the game, but because I was playing it for like 2 weeks straight, like nonstop living that world, I got to a point where I got some races that were very frustrating. And I got into, so like my ending on that, even though it was mostly positive review, and then I had some negative things, I kind of gave it where I think I gave like a pass for now and stuff like that. And I'm looking back and looking at the word, watching that wording, I'm kind of like, I probably was a little too strong on that. I don't think I would have changed my opinion. I just think I was a little too, strong on that. Also, and then the hardware side, I had some reviews. I got beat up over the CSL Xbox review, because I spent a lot of time on the negatives and how, like, the wheelbase wouldn't stay steady, which was a thing, and even as much feedback as I got from Fanatec, which, by the way, Fanatec was also an interesting one in terms of anytime you do a review, the next day I'd have an email from Thomas, saying, what you missed or whatnot, where I never got any feedback ever from Thrustmaster, even though they were a big sponsor of the show, and you always worried about, you want to be, people thinking you're going easy because they're a sponsor. I mean, I only talked to those guys at E3, and That was my only interaction with them ever, so that was always kind of funny. The most interaction I got was with people who, everyone thought we didn't like or whatever through sponsorship and bias and stuff. But it's there's definitely times like that were challenging, and just trying to do my best to that's getting out with that wheel is there's times where at some reviews where I would go and I would say like, this part's a pro, it's really great, I don't know what other words to lend to this other than it's great, and then in the cons part I would really try to explain myself, 'cause I know people would challenge me, and then it become like half the video, and then people would equate you liking or not liking something on how much time you spent on in the video. So looking back, there were so many learning curves of things that I could have done better. And there's some reviews I go back and look. I watched a GT Sport review just the other day, wheel, and I felt, or not the GT Sport, the TGT, and I thought I did a really good job there in terms of the length of it and presenting the pros and the cons and giving my opinion. And then there's other ones I look back and I kind of cringe. So getting feedback from getting feedback from the community and others. Over time change things, and that was probably the most challenging thing. You just don't want to come off as somebody who does reviews. You just don't want to come off as biased, and you want to make everyone happy. And at some point, you got to realize you're not gonna make everyone happy.
So that was a challenge.
Definitely, and I hear you on all that, because I certainly not on the scale of ISR, but I do my own reviews, and it's funny. What I've found is that for the most part, sort of people want to be proven right in their opinions. Yes. My second most hated video, my first most hated video was something to do with Gran Turismo Sport, which we don't need to get into today. But my second most was just after it came out, Project Cars 2, excuse me. I did 7 cars that I like and 2 cars that I don't like. And those 2 cars that I didn't like attracted so much hate. It's really unbelievable. Yeah. People, I might as well have not done these 7 cars I like at all. I might as well have just done the last 5 minutes of that video where I talked about 2 cars that I wasn't happy with. Quite frankly, I don't even remember what the cars were at this point, but it was just message after message. I don't know what I'm talking about, and that's actually how cars should feel, and they worked with the actual race teams and blah blah blah. And so I feel you there, John. I understand entirely. It's just kind of, if you're going to say anything negative at all, just make it quick, or best to avoid it is probably the best advice I could offer.
Yeah, and that is a bit of a frustrating thing with YouTube and just the internet in general. Things that are, look at newspapers or the news. If it bleeds, it leads. Because it's like people react more to negative information than if everything's positive. And you're right, you like again, everything in life these days, you look at news channel with politics, people tend to go towards their echo chamber, and that's what they want here. They want you to justify their opinions, their feelings, and also the amount of money they spent on game or hardware. They want you to justify, and if you're not justifying their what they're doing, people tend to lash out, and that's definitely the aspect that that's a huge aspect that I really do not miss, and it does something that kind of gives me pause for. I have thought about what I want to do in the future, and is it doing some videos? Is it maybe just doing more of the writing side? Because I started with just the writing on ISR TV, and I really like the writing. I really like doing the long form written reviews, kind of almost like old school games journalism. Even though I'm not a journalist, but going down that route, and then these type of decisions in terms of the back, what response you get back from community, I've put into account, because unfortunately you can get 10 glowing reviews, but you get 1 negative review, that one sticks to you way more, and that's just kind of, and I feel like it's the same for everyone, and it's being human, and you just got to be able to, have real thick skin, but eventually it does get tiring.
For sure.
Yeah.
Listen, guys, I got to jump off, but Davy, thank you so much for hosting, and John, it's so great to hear your voice, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
John, you're such a legend in sim racing, and we missed hearing your voice for a long time. So it's great to have you back on the scene, man. And I look forward to a lot more from you in the future.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on and the kind words.
Now, the back to the negative review. Is it the negative feedback, like Mike talking about his 7 favorite cars and the 2 least favorite, and he got so much hate. If, like, whether it's a game or a piece of hardware, is it kind of is it a buyer's remorse thing that people want you to be positive about something that they've invested in, and if you don't, it's like, it's like not hatred, but it's really like a backlash.
I think I think if it's something that they either already own or B are really hyped to get, I do think people take it as you're calling them stupid, essentially. Really? I do think people take it that way. I mean, you're going against all these feelings and thoughts that they've had, and again, that translates into hard-earned money that's spent. So I do think there is a lot of that, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate, and again, we also got to put in here, again, this isn't everyone, and it's probably not even the majority. It's probably a lot of people out there that go, oh, okay, well, I mean, they say this is better, I got this, well, maybe one day I'll be able to afford that, or this is what I got, I like it good enough, I'm gonna go on with my day and not put any more thought into it. Thanks for the video. Yeah, you that's probably what the vast majority of thoughts and comments are. But I mean, no, I mean there's a vocal minority that definitely goes and makes it tougher on everyone else. Yeah.
I think in terms of the negative comments, I think anonymity online, that's the worst thing, because you can call yourself, whatever, and you can go on and you can be as mean as you want and nobody knows who you are. But it's different than when you go on, like if I go on Google, I'm using my name, my channel name, so to speak, and people can click on it and see who I am. So if I'm going to make a comment, and I don't regularly make mean comments, I wouldn't in general, but if I did say something that somebody disagreed with, they can click on it and go to the channel and know exactly who I am,
100%. And something it's interesting in general internet society. I don't know which way this is going. See, when iRacing came out and they made you use your name on your credit card, I thought that was brilliant. Like, I thought this is such a good idea, because now, you know who this person is. Yes. Now, and so, like, I've kind of carried that on. I mean, obviously, then I did Inside Sim Racing. My name's out there. I'm like, okay, the cat's out of the bag. I'm out there. So, like I mentioned in Billy's podcast, I follow a lot of real racing. I spend a lot of my time over at racer.com. Yes. On their, putting comments like everyone else on real racing topics, and they use Discuss there. I have my real name. I am John Sabol. There is a picture of me, because it's like I don't want to hide behind an avatar. I mean, this is me. Like I said, at this point, I can understand people want to kind of be, not put themselves out there from maybe a safety thing or whatever. But it's like I've been out there, so like. On Discuss, I'm John Sabol. On Twitter, my username is John Sabol, because that was the only thing available. Yeah. John Sabol wasn't available, and I wanted something that was, again, I didn't want an avatar. I wanted something that was a little more, my name. So, people can look me up on that there and follow me if you want to hear me complain about NASCAR coverage and how great IndyCar is these days. Those are the main two train of thoughts. But but with that said, I was kind of hoping that as people get online earlier and earlier, that they would go and use more like their real names and stuff like that, and get rid of hiding behind usernames. But I think maybe the opposite's happening, because as kids get on younger and younger, as a kid, you just kind of more go towards a username. And also, I don't know if, kids should be using their real name on the internet. I don't know if that's a good thing. No, so
that's a good point.
Yeah, so they're using usernames, and then also there seems to be this culture now of, like, you go on the internet to be mean to people, and that's just how it is. And so like when people get confronted in real life, I've seen a little bit of this for things they said, like real nasty stuff. It's kind of like that's just what you do. Like that's become accepted, and that's a real concern. So we'll see where it goes. You know, you get 12, 13, 14-year-olds going online, and then going forward. You hope at some point there's a realization that, no, you know, these words matter, and this can come back to real life, and we should treat the internet like real life.
Yeah.
But I don't know. So, it's interesting.
Yeah, and I guess if you start as a kid, maybe you get an Xbox age 9 or 10. You go with your name, whatever, you make up a name, and you go into teens, late teens, and early 20s, and you still have the same name. And maybe you want to change it, but like for example with PlayStation, you can't. So
you can't. Yeah, exactly.
You're the silly name you created when you were 9 years old, and you can't change it. And like I notice many forums, I'll go in, I'll make a name, and I want to change it to my actual name because I'm now kind of representing my channel across multiple channels, but I'm not able to. So then you kind of have to create a new account and so on. So.
Well, and you brought up kind of funny earlier, and they had Colin and Greg used to have PS I Love You show, and they have the terrible PSN names, where people would give their awful PSN name from back when they were a dumb kid, and now they want to change it, and you can't. You're stuck with it, and as things go more digital in the game's point, you do get stuck with that. So hopefully these companies. Like, I know it's a pain. They probably don't do it because it's a major headache on their part.
Yeah.
But it's like, yes, please change something in your system that allows people to change their usernames at least once.
Yeah.
At least get like one get out of jail free card when you become an adult and you realize that this name is awful.
Yeah.
So that's. Oh, it's
and I remember,
something.
exactly. Greg and Colin would be on PS I Love You, and they'd be saying, "Shuhei Yoshida, you're watching, aren't you? When are we getting the ability to change our names?" You know, so
exactly.
Now, I don't want to keep you all day, so I had some notes now. You talked about you would like to get back into iRacing, and you're interested in F1 2018, which is coming out this month. And you're also interested in perhaps a World Rally Championship game. The next version is 6, 7, or 8. I think it's 7 or 8. And then GT Sport. And then you were curious about Assetto Corsa Competizione from the point of view of the fact that it's going to be using Unreal Engine 4, and it will have rain effects and day to night transitions. But so those are the things you're looking forward to, and then I thought about, for example, Assetto Corsa itself, and R Factor 2, and Race Room, and Project Cars 2. So what games are you playing now or looking to play, and what are the things that you would be interested in? And now and dovetailing in a way to the motorsports you follow. I know you follow NASCAR, and I guess you also Formula 1, and perhaps IndyCar. So are the games you like to play, are they kind of in a way directly related to the motorsports you follow? Now, the games you play may not necessarily have the forms of motorsport that you follow, but is there if, for example, if there's NASCAR inside iRacing, are you kind of playing iRacing for the NASCAR, or would you be looking forward to Formula 1 2018 because of Formula 1, or how do you see it right now?
No, I mean, there's definitely, I got into sim racing because I'm such a racing fan, and I went into sim racing to, try to be like my favorite drivers on the weekends. So, no, like I mentioned earlier, iRacing, getting the new 2018 bodywork for the Indy cars, like, at the very beginning of the year when the bodywork first came out, was such a big thing. I remember when when the DW12 IndyCar came out in 2012, the iRacing version, which was the first version in any game out there, didn't come out until 2 years later, 2014, I think.
Okay.
It was 20. No, it was. I think it was 2015.
Yeah,
it was. So it was like 3 years later, and then at that point, they had gone on to like they changed the body kit again or something. So it's so neat when the games are able to update right away with new cars.
Yes,
that motivates me a lot. Also in the iRacing world, I was very excited to see how like now they got the 911 RSR there. Now, of course, Assetto Corsa got it first, and I love driving that car in Assetto Corsa. So, that's very exciting. And then also when Assetto Corsa got the 2017 Ferrari, that was pretty exciting. Even though I could never quite get my head wrapped around that car for whatever reason. That was always a real struggle for me. Yeah. And I don't know how much was me or the car. I really didn't spend enough time on it to say. But there is a good amount of what I watch that translates to that. I do watch a lot of F1, and I am curious, but I'm interested in F1 2018. Like I said, iRacing side right now, and a lot of reasons I say iRacing, not that something I've done for a long time, but because like we talked about earlier, I'm so limited on time.
Yes,
it's easier to jump into something that I know, and also I really like racing online, and the only way to race online for the most part without having a really set planned out schedule is being able to jump in on a session in iRacing. Yeah. So an open race versus having to get a whole league stuff set up and all that kind of jazz. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So that's something that kind of gets me leaning towards that. But I am interested in I have been jonesing to drive WRC 7 again. I know 8's going to be coming out. Or maybe I'll just go back to 7 because I really enjoyed that.
Isn't 7 the latest one, John? Sorry, I don't recall.
Yeah, no, I don't worry. I messed this up last week with Billy because I couldn't keep track. But yeah, I think right now the number matches what year it is. So
okay.
27. So last year was 7. I guess this year's 8. I guess I haven't really seen any previews for it, but I assume it's coming because it was released about this time last year. So I don't know.
That's Kyloton in France, isn't it? So
correct. And up until last year, there wasn't a whole lot to get excited from that series. But last year, I mean, the physics got better. They're still not not the best, but they got better. And then also, more importantly, the stages were awesome. Yeah, they did a great job with the stages.
Billy was very impressed with that game. He was very impressed. I remember he did a kind of a driving review, and he was very impressed, and you as well. So it's interesting. That's a title I was interested in. Yeah.
So that's so that's kind of where I'm looking at going forward here. And then I mean I really probably do need to get back into at least seeing what's going on with Project Cars 2 some more. I haven't raced much of I used to race a decent amount of Assetto Corsa. I haven't in a while, and I've also been out of race room for a bit. And I know they got the new WTCR cars
and the Porsche
that I like to check out. So no, I mean it, like everything, there is this is something I always kind of wondered from inside sim racing perspective. Obviously, when I was doing that full time, I had the time and the motivation to go and check out all this new stuff
to keep up to date.
Exactly, but now as I've gone back to being a civilian, essentially, it's
a civilian sim racer.
There's this is something I was always kind of amazed because we get people would go and the same people would comment on all these different sims. I'm like, are you racing all these different things? Because I don't know how you have enough time. And then not only do on Inside Sim Racing, us covering everything, I struggled enough to cover everything, much less, as you get into one game, you go down a rabbit hole. And you get an R Factor 2, and Assetto Corsa, and there's mods, and then there's different apps, and then it keeps on going on and on and on, and you can get really deep where you kind of lose, you don't see the light anymore. Yeah. And then, so that makes it, I don't know how people run so many different things, and maybe they've got more free time than I do.
They must have.
They must have. So I'm hoping to kind of get back focused, and it'll probably be mostly like I said, the IndyCar and iRacing is something that I'm kind of just setting my sights on and trying to run that more every week. And also, I want to get back and understand the car. For a little while there, I got decent at car setups, especially like on the IndyCar. Where I kind of figured it out. I figured out what I needed to do with the baseline setup from suspension and the aero and all that kind of stuff. But I got into doing inside sim racing. I just didn't have time to do the setup stuff, and I really got out of that. Yeah. And the setup side is so important to the sim racing and enjoyment levels. I used to not understand why there was like fixed setup, or even the appeal of something, say like, you know, a console racer like a Gran Turismo Sport or a Forza, where you can use a couple sliders, but for the most part you just kind of like drive it how it is.
Yeah.
You know, I used to be, when I got into sim racing, I was like, ugh, that sounds terrible. I want to be able to tweak with everything. But now, as I've gotten older and a little more less time on my hands, I'm like, yeah, something fixed that you just jump in and focus on driving, that doesn't sound so bad.
Yeah, that is true. And I have tried toe and camber, and I still, God bless, I still don't get it. And we had actually Alex Hodgkinson from Sector 3, who's doing the physics now for Race Room. He's actually a driving instructor himself, and he created an image, a document which is like explains it one page, and I've been struggling. But something you said was interesting. Maybe if you become used to the system inside iRacing, let's say iRacing have a setup screen with a series of tabs. If you become used to how that works, that can create a lot of stickiness in a way, because you can kind of, I want to drive maybe the sprint cars on dirt, or maybe you want to drive IndyCar, NASCAR. I can go between different classes, but I can understand the system because the different titles, they all have it implemented in different ways. And it can, like you said, you could go into R Factor 2 in the workshop and then race department, or a set of course and race department for mods. You go down the rabbit hole, you might never come out.
Oh yeah, no, 100%. And I think that's a tough thing too. Some people get in a sim race and they find it really daunting. They get into sim and they're like, I don't like this, and it's like, well, you might like this if we change this setting back in the INI file, or here's a setup to this car. Here's some tips on how to drive this track. It's just they're sims. They're sims, and to some degree, unfortunately, it's a very fractured market, it makes it. It makes it unfortunate in that there's less users for each game, which then makes it tougher on the developers, and it maybe has to cost more, and then it's tougher to get a unified voice. So I look back to flight simulators. I was never really in this world, so maybe I'm messing this up, but like for the longest time there was like the official Microsoft flight sim that seemed like for the most part,
which is back now on Steam. Yeah, by the way, yeah,
that's what I heard. Yeah. So for the most part, I feel like at least maybe a good chunk of the community, let's say, focused on that one thing. So if you wanted to get into it, there was kind of one path to go. I mean, I saw that a little bit with NASCAR Racing 2003. If you wanted to go oval racing on the computer, all you had with NASCAR Racing 2003, R Factor tried a little bit, but that wasn't very good. So you had one pathway to go, so you got into it, and it's like, okay, here's the pathway, and it was simpler to get going into it and get down a road to, maybe a little more enjoyment. Yeah. Here, it's so much, these days now, it's like, ooh, shiny light, shiny light, shiny light. So you bounce around, bounce around, bounce around. I think it's easier to be almost not as content instead of just finding one thing and working on doing that well. Yeah. So yeah, it's all interesting. But hey, I do need to get running myself here, Davey. So
John, thank you very much for joining. And as Mike said, it's great to hear your voice. And it's great to hear you kind of back and talking, and you have so much to say and so much history, and I think so many people are so eager to hear what you have to say. So thank you very much for joining. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been a lot of fun, and I'll try to stick around, at least on Discord side and maybe forums here and there. And I don't know, maybe we'll see. Maybe at some point in the future I'll figure something out where I can have my voice out there more, or I'll just keep coming on other people's podcasts, and that'll work out too.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, John.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed the podcast, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. And your comments and questions are always welcome on the comment section below the video player on YouTube. The podcast is available on multiple podcasting services such as iTunes, Google Play and Stitcher Radio, and will also include RSS feeds for adding to your favourite podcasting player, along with a link to my website where you can either listen to the episode or simply download the MP3 file. And if you're listening to the podcast on a podcasting service such as iTunes, we'd appreciate the addition of a rating and a review there as well. Until next time, thank you.